The orbital station had been designed by three species who could not agree on gravity, lighting, or silence, and the compromise offended everyone equally. Vincent considered this a diplomatic success. He sat at the long negotiation table, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes fixed on a floating slate that refused to stop glowing, even when politely tapped. The station's artificial gravity hummed at a level that made human joints ache just enough to be noticeable, as if to remind him that space itself disapproved of prolonged meetings. Across from him sat Ambassador Kyreth. She looked human at first glance. Same symmetry, same calm posture, same measured breathing, but her long ears curved back elegantly from her head, catching the light as they shifted almost imperceptibly with her mood. Vincent had learned, over months of negotiations, that those ears were far more honest than her voice. When they tilted slightly inward, she was amused. When they angled back, she was irritated. At the moment they were neutral, which was somehow worse. "We are not rejecting the corridor proposal," Kyreth said, her voice smooth and precise, filtered through the station's translation field. "We are rejecting the current definition of shared oversight." Vincent nodded, scribbling notes he would not remember writing. "Of course, shared oversight is a very flexible concept, like time or budgets." A few delegates chuckled politely. Humor, Vincent had learned, was safest when aimed at abstractions. This was the fifth session of the day, or the sixth. Time behaved strangely on the station, and so did Vincent's brain. He had slept 4 hours in the last 2 days, one of which had been spent dreaming that the negotiation table had turned into a fish and demanded voting rights. He was surviving on caffeine synthesized by a species that did not metabolize stimulants, and therefore saw no reason to make them gentle. Kyreth glanced at him, one brow lifting slightly. "You appear diminished." "That's the nicest word anyone's used all week," Vincent said. "I assure you, Ambassador, I am fully operational. Mostly." Her ears flicked inward. Amusement. The talks continued, drifting through trade metrics, defense clauses, and the ethical implications of shared star maps. Vincent found himself responding on instinct, his training carrying him forward while his conscious mind lagged a few seconds behind, waving apologetically. He trusted the translator implicitly. It had never betrayed him before. Kyreth concluded a point with a subtle nod. "That is our position." Vincent exhaled, ready to respond, already forming the argument he had rehearsed a dozen times. His mouth opened. His tired brain reached for a familiar phrase, a soft verbal cushion he used back home when conversations grew tense, something his grandmother had said to everyone from waiters to tax officials. "All right," he said, leaning forward slightly, voice warm with forced steadiness. "I understand, my love, but—" The room stopped. It did not pause. It did not quiet. It stopped, as if someone had reached out and turned existence down to zero. The translation field completed its work with brutal efficiency. Vincent felt the words leave his mouth and realized what he had said somewhere between the syllables and the echo. His stomach dropped through the floor, possibly through the hull, and continued toward open space. Kyreth froze. Her ears snapped back, then stilled. Her eyes widened. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough that Vincent knew with perfect clarity that something had gone catastrophically wrong. A delegate on the far end of the table coughed. Another dropped a stylus, which clattered far too loudly against the floor. Somewhere a data pad chimed, blissfully unaware of the social extinction event unfolding. Vincent's brain offered several helpful suggestions, including pretending he had died, claiming a medical emergency, or blaming the translator and fleeing before it could defend itself. Kyreth did not speak. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until Vincent was fairly certain it had acquired legal standing. He began, then stopped. Anything after that would only make it worse. He smiled weakly, the universal expression for "please don't let this be real." Finally, Kyreth inhaled slowly. When she spoke, her voice was as controlled as ever, but something beneath it had shifted, like a star changing orbit. "Negotiator Vincent," she said formally, "I believe we require a private discussion." Her ears angled neither back nor in. They angled forward. Vincent nodded far too quickly. "Yes, absolutely. Privately, very privately." as private as possible. The delegations erupted into whispered chaos as the station's doors slid open. Vincent stood on unsteady legs, acutely aware that he had just done something no training manual covered. As he followed Kyreth out of the chamber, his mind replayed the moment again and again, each time worse. He had negotiated ceasefires. He had survived first contact dinners. He had once insulted a hive mind by accident and lived. But this felt different. And as the doors closed behind them, sealing off the stunned galaxy outside, Vincent realized with dawning horror that exhaustion might not be the only reason his heart was racing. The corridor outside the negotiation chamber was quieter than it had any right to be. Vincent suspected the station was mocking him. The lights dimmed automatically to what the designers considered a neutral interspecies comfort level, which translated to something between a hospital hallway and a confessional. Kyreth walked a half step ahead of him, her posture straight, her long ears angled slightly backward, not hostile, not relaxed, but alert. That, Vincent had learned, was never a good sign. He resisted the urge to speak. Every word felt like a potential new disaster. The translator field hovered faithfully near his collarbone, innocent and deadly, waiting to ruin his life again. They entered a small consultation room designed for informal diplomatic recalibration, which meant there were 2 chairs, a table, and a faint hum from the wall panels that suggested the room was listening but promised not to gossip. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss that sounded uncomfortably final. Kyreth turned to face him. Up close, Vincent was struck, as he often was, by how carefully composed she seemed. Her face was calm, her expression neutral, but her ears betrayed a restless tension, making small, involuntary adjustments, as if they were trying to tune into a signal only they could hear. He wondered absurdly if humans would be better diplomats if their emotions waved little flags above their heads. Neither of them sat. Vincent cleared his throat. The sound echoed far too loudly. "Ambassador, I want to apologize immediately, profusely, and possibly repeatedly. What I said was, a term of bonding," Kyreth said evenly. "Yes," Vincent replied, "which I did not intend. Not consciously. I mean, I intended the sentence, but not the meaning. It's a linguistic reflex, like saying oops, except catastrophically worse." One corner of her mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not quite. Her ears shifted inward for a fraction of a second, then corrected themselves. "In your language," she said, "such terms are used casually?" "Painfully casually," Vincent said. "I once called a vending machine that when it gave me the right snack." Kyreth paused. "Your people court food dispensers?" "Only the good ones." Silence fell again, but it was different this time. Thinner, less deadly. Kyreth moved to one of the chairs and sat, folding her hands neatly in her lap. Vincent followed suit, perching on the edge like a student awaiting judgment. The table between them projected a soft star map by default, as if hoping to remind them both that there were entire galaxies to worry about instead of this. "In my culture," Kyreth said, "such a phrase carries legal, emotional, and social implications." Vincent nodded. "Of course it does, because why wouldn't it? If spoken publicly," she continued, "it constitutes a declaration of intent to bond." Vincent stared at the star map. One of the stars flickered as the projection recalibrated. "Right, bond, which I did not intend to declare. To anyone, ever, publicly, accidentally." Her ears angled forward slightly, focused, curious. "And yet," she said, "you spoke it without hesitation." Vincent opened his mouth, then closed it. He rubbed his face with both hands, dragging them downward as if trying to physically pull himself back in time. "I'm exhausted," he said finally. "My brain has been running on emergency power for days. Sometimes it just reaches for familiar shapes." Kyreth studied him in silence. He could feel it, the way her attention seemed sharper than human focus, as if she were listening not just to his words but to the spaces between them. It made him acutely aware of every breath. "There is another matter," she said at last. Vincent braced himself. "Of course there is. I will dismiss this publicly as a translation error. Kyreth said. It is the least destabilizing option. Relief washed over him so fast he nearly laughed. Thank you, truly. I will personally write a thank you note to your sense of mercy. That will not be necessary, she said. Then after a beat, however, there it was. Vincent's shoulders slumped. I knew there was a however. There's always a however. Kyreth's ears tilted inward, unmistakably this time. Amusement. You learn quickly. She leaned back slightly in her chair, her gaze steady. Privately, I must ask you something, and you must answer honestly. Vincent swallowed. I'm very bad at lying under pressure, so this should be efficient. Were your words entirely meaningless, she asked, or did they reflect something you have chosen not to examine? The question landed softly and hit hard. Vincent laughed, a short, helpless sound. That's unfairly perceptive. Kyreth did not smile, but her eyes softened just a little. Months of negotiation teach one many things. Vincent looked down at his hands. They were shaking slightly. He hadn't noticed until now. I didn't plan to feel anything, he said. I planned to survive the talks, secure the quarter, and sleep for a week. That was the entire emotional roadmap. And yet, Vincent said, exhaling slowly, somewhere between trade clause revisions and your jokes about human bureaucracy, things got complicated. Her ears stilled completely. The room hummed quietly around them, the station holding its breath. Outside, negotiations waited, treaties balanced on careful words. Inside, Vincent realized that this might be the most delicate discussion he had ever entered, not because of politics, but because for the first time, he wasn't entirely sure which parts of his own heart were speaking by accident and which ones had been waiting for permission. Kyreth did not respond immediately. She stood and moved toward the wall panel, placing her palm against its surface. The room acknowledged her with a soft tonal shift, and the faint hum altered frequency. Vincent suspected privacy protocols had just been upgraded from polite discretion to absolutely no recordings, no exceptions, and if you're listening, shame on you. She turned back to him. In my species, Kyreth said, we believe exhaustion lowers the walls that reason builds. It reveals what has been waiting patiently behind them. Vincent groaned quietly. Humans believe exhaustion just makes us say stupid things. Both may be true, she replied. He snorted despite himself, then quickly covered it with a cough. The tension in the room bent, but did not break. Kyreth returned to her chair, though she sat differently now, less rigid, one leg crossed, posture subtly less formal. Vincent took this as either a good sign or the calm before a cultural catastrophe. You should understand what occurred outside that chamber, she said. When you spoke those words, several members of my delegation initiated emergency protocol scans. Vincent blinked. For what? Sudden declarations of affection? For confirmation of intent, Kyreth said, and to determine whether I was obligated to respond immediately. Vincent's eyes widened. Respond how? Publicly, she said, with acceptance, refusal, or ceremonial deferral. He stared at her. There's a ceremony? There are several, she said calmly. Some involve witnesses. One involves fire. Vincent leaned back so fast his chair protested. I want it on record that I did not propose with fire. Kyreth's lips pressed together, and for a brief, shining moment, she laughed. It was soft, surprised, and entirely unguarded. Her ears tilted inward and stayed there. That, she said, is the first time you have made me laugh during a crisis. I'm honored, Vincent said weakly. I think. The laughter faded, but something remained in its place. A warmth, a crack in the perfect diplomatic shell. Kyreth studied him now not as a negotiator, but as a person who had stumbled into something deeply personal with remarkable clumsiness. You asked whether your words were meaningless, she said. I will tell you why I ask. Vincent nodded, bracing himself. For months, Kyreth continued, I have observed you. Your species fascinates us. Your emotional volatility, your tendency to bond rapidly, your alarming willingness to joke in situations others would treat as sacred. Hey, Vincent said, we respect the sacred. We just also panic. Her eyes gleamed. You never treated me as an object of curiosity, nor as a symbol. You treated me as Kyreth. You noticed when I was irritated before I spoke. You adjusted your arguments to accommodate my concerns without announcing it. That is rare. Vincent swallowed. I just thought I was doing my job. Perhaps, she said, or perhaps you were doing more. He stared at the star map again, watching trade routes glow faintly between distant systems. I didn't mean to cross any lines. Lines, Kyreth said gently, exist so that someone eventually questions why they are there. Vincent laughed under his breath. You're very good at this. I negotiate for a living, and I feel like I've been backed into an emotional corner. That would imply intent, she said. I assure you this conversation was not planned. Good, he said, because if it were, I'd be terrified. She tilted her head slightly, studying him from a new angle. Tell me something, Vincent. When you addressed me moments before the incident, before the words, what were you feeling? He frowned, genuinely trying to remember. Frustrated, tired, determined, and... He hesitated. Relieved. Her ears flicked forward. Relieved? You just made a point that saved us from another hour of arguing, he said. You always do that. You cut through things. It feels like working with someone who actually sees the problem instead of just defending their side. Kyreth considered this. You admire me. Yes, Vincent said quickly. Professionally, deeply, enthusiastically. And personally? He grimaced. That's where things get fuzzy. Fuzzy, she repeated, tasting the word. Human technical term, Vincent said. Means I should have slept more. Kyreth leaned back, folding her arms. There is something you should know. If I had chosen to respond publicly, even to refuse, it would have altered our working relationship permanently. Vincent winced. I'm very glad you didn't. So am I, she said, then quieter. But not for the reason you think. He looked up. In my culture, Kyreth continued, bonding is not impulsive. It is considered after long observation, mutual trust, and shared purpose. Months, sometimes years. Vincent blinked. That sounds surprisingly reasonable. Which is why, she said, your words unsettled me. Not because they were inappropriate, but because they arrived at a moment when I had begun to consider similar questions. The silence returned, but now it was charged, alive. Vincent let out a slow breath. So what you're saying is, I accidentally said something out loud that maybe neither of us had fully admitted yet. Yes, Kyreth said, and you did so in front of 2 delegations, 3 recording systems, and 1 species that communicates exclusively through dramatic gasps. Of course I did, Vincent muttered. I can never do things quietly. Kyreth stood again, pacing slowly. This changes nothing publicly. The talks will continue. The corridor will be negotiated. History will remember today as a minor translation anomaly. And privately? Vincent asked. She stopped in front of him, her ears angled inward, steady and unmistakable. Privately, she said, we must decide whether this was an error to be corrected or an opening to be explored. Vincent met her gaze, heart pounding, exhaustion forgotten for the moment. Somewhere beyond the walls, stars burned, treaties waited, and civilizations balanced on careful words. For once, Vincent had no prepared response, and for once that felt oddly right. The consultation room felt smaller than it had minutes ago, though Vincent suspected that was entirely psychological. He shifted in his chair, aware that Kyreth was still standing in front of him, close enough now that he could see the faint, almost iridescent pattern along her pupils. Something he'd noticed before, but never had time to wonder about. An opening, Vincent repeated, mostly to buy himself a second. That sounds less terrifying than the alternatives you could have chosen. Kyreth's ears angled outward slightly, a gesture he'd come to recognize as cautious agreement. She returned to her chair but did not sit immediately. Instead, she leaned against the edge of the table, arms resting loosely at her sides. You should understand, she said, that my request for privacy was not without risk. Vincent raised an eyebrow. Because of the fire ceremony? Because of rumors, she corrected. And because some members of my delegation believe humans treat emotion as a recreational activity. He winced. In our defense, we don't get many other hobbies in space. That earned him a look, half incredulous, half amused. She sat at last, crossing one leg over the other with deliberate slowness. There are already theories forming outside this room, she continued. Some believe you intentionally tested our customs. Others believe I orchestrated the moment. Vincent groaned. Please tell me no one thinks this was a strategic seduction. One advisor used the phrase weaponized charm, Kyreth said calmly. Vincent stared at the ceiling. I wore this suit because it was clean. That's the full extent of my strategy. Her ears flicked inward again, betraying a smile she did not fully allow. I corrected them. Thank you. I appreciate you defending my accidental romantic incompetence. She tilted her head. You assume incompetence. He looked back at her. Is that not the correct assumption? Kyreth studied him for a long moment. Vincent had the distinct feeling of being evaluated in a way no performance review had ever prepared him for. Finally, she spoke. When you first arrived on the station, she said, you mispronounced my name. I did, Vincent said. Twice. I'm still ashamed. And yet, she continued, you corrected yourself every time. You asked. You practiced. You did not replace it with something easier, as many do. He shrugged. It's your name. That mattered to me, she said simply. The room fell quiet again, but this time the silence felt companionable. Vincent realized his hands had stopped shaking. He rested them on the table, fingers loosely interlaced. I need to be clear, he said. Whatever this is, I don't want it to compromise the talks, or put you in a position where... You believe I would not protect my people first, she asked, not unkindly. He smiled faintly. I believe you protect everyone in the room, even if it costs you sleep, which is a quality I admire, and fear. Her eyes softened. You are observant. Only when it matters, Vincent said, and sometimes when it doesn't, which is how we got here. Kyreth exhaled slowly, a controlled release that reminded him of the station's airlock cycling. I will speak plainly, she said. This is not a proposal. Not yet. It is a consideration. He nodded. I can handle consideration. I consider things all the time, mostly snacks. She smiled openly now, a small curve of her lips that felt like a victory. You use humor as a stabilizing mechanism. Is it working? Marginally, she said, but I find it effective. Outside the room, a distant vibration passed through the station as a ship undocked. Vincent glanced instinctively toward the wall. Life continues, he murmured, even when you accidentally propose to an alien ambassador. In fairness, Kyreth said, your species does many things accidentally. True. We once invented a new kind of engine because someone spilled coolant on a prototype. Her ears angled forward sharply. I read about that. You call it innovation. We call a lot of things innovation. She rose again, pacing slowly now, her movements fluid and precise. If we are to explore this opening, she said, it must be done carefully, privately, without assumptions. I'm very good at not assuming, Vincent said. It's one of my flaws. She stopped in front of him. Then let us begin with clarity. He met her gaze. All right. Do you regret what you said? She asked. The question was simple. The answer was not. Vincent considered deflecting, joking, buying time. Instead, he took a breath and chose honesty. I regret the timing, he said. The setting, the fact that half the galaxy heard it. I regret the stress it caused you. And the words themselves? He hesitated, then shook his head. No. Her ears stilled completely. For a moment, she looked almost vulnerable. Then she straightened, composure sliding back into place like armor. That is sufficient, she said. He blinked. That's it? For now, she replied. We will return to the negotiations. We will maintain professionalism, and we will allow this possibility to exist without forcing it. Vincent smiled, a little crooked. You realize this is the least efficient negotiation I've ever been part of. Kyreth's lips curved again. And yet, you are still at the table. She moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the panel. One more thing, Vincent. Yes? Do not call me that again, she said, her tone carefully neutral. He nodded quickly. Understood. Never again. Her ears flicked inward, just for an instant. Not accidentally. The door slid open, releasing the hum of the station and the weight of waiting eyes beyond. As they stepped back into the world of treaties and protocols, Vincent felt something settle inside him. Not certainty, not resolution, but a quiet awareness. Some negotiations did not end with signatures. Some had only just begun. The negotiation chamber welcomed them back with the polite indifference of a room that had seen worse mistakes than accidental proposals. Vincent took his seat, acutely aware of every movement he made, every breath he took, as if the universe had installed a spotlight directly above his chair. Across the table, Kyreth resumed her position with flawless composure, her long ears held neutrally, betraying nothing. If not for the faintest echo of their private conversation still ringing in his mind, Vincent might have believed nothing had happened at all. Almost. The delegates watched them with the kind of curiosity usually reserved for unstable reactors and unexplained phenomena. Someone from the third delegation, an avian species with too many eyes, blinked in a slow, deliberate pattern that Vincent suspected meant "tell us everything." He focused on his slate instead. "We will proceed," Kyreth said calmly, "with the revised oversight parameters." Vincent nodded. "Yes, revised parameters. Very revised." She glanced at him, just a glance, brief, controlled, and yet it carried enough meaning to make his heart misfire like a faulty thruster. The talks resumed. Numbers floated. Legal language tangled itself into elegant knots. Vincent found himself unusually attentive, as if clarity had returned with a vengeance now that his emotional crisis had been acknowledged and politely set aside. Or maybe it was adrenaline. Humans ran on strange fuels. At one point, Kyreth corrected a clause Vincent had missed. He caught her eye and mouthed "thank you." Her ears flicked inward for half a second. It felt like a private joke told across a battlefield. During a scheduled recess, Vincent retreated to a refreshment alcove that dispensed beverages optimized for 14 different biologies. He selected something labeled hydration adjacent and hoped for the best. As he took a sip, it fizzed ominously. "Still alive?" came a voice beside him. He nearly choked. Kyreth stood there a discreet distance away, holding a small cup of something faintly luminescent. She had disengaged from the delegation cluster with the same effortless precision she applied to everything else. "Define alive," Vincent said, coughing. "This drink is trying to colonize my tongue." She examined his cup. "You selected one with reactive minerals." "I like to live dangerously." Her ears angled inward. "I noticed." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching a group of delegates argue softly near a holographic display. Vincent became acutely aware that this was the first time they had stood together without a table, a title, or a translator mediating the space between them. "I reviewed the incident reports," Kyreth said quietly. Vincent groaned. "There are reports." 17, she said. 3 contradictory theories. 1 suggestion that you are an avant-garde cultural provocateur. "I once tripped over a carpet and apologized to it," Vincent said. "I am not avant-garde." "I informed them it was fatigue," she continued, "and that the matter was resolved." "Thank you," he said sincerely, "for handling that, and for earlier." She inclined her head. "Clarity benefits all negotiations." He hesitated. "Even the internal ones?" "Especially those," she replied. The station's artificial day cycle shifted, light warming subtly as if to simulate a sunset that no one present had ever seen. Vincent glanced toward the viewport at the end of the hall, where stars stretched endlessly, distant and indifferent. "I keep thinking about something you said," he admitted, "about exhaustion revealing things." Her ears tilted forward. And I'm wondering," he said, "how many truths we suppress just because they're inconvenient." Kyreth considered this. "In my culture, inconvenience is often a sign of importance." He smiled. "That explains a lot." They returned to the chamber when the recess ended, slipping seamlessly back into their roles. The rest of the session passed without incident, which felt like a minor miracle. When it finally adjourned, Vincent felt the familiar weight of fatigue settle back onto his shoulders, but beneath it, something steadier remained. Later, much later, Vincent found himself in the observation ring, staring out at the slow drift of distant ships. He had not planned to be there. His feet had simply carried him. "You favor this location," Kyreth said behind him. He turned unsurprised this time. "It's quiet, and it reminds me that whatever mess I make, the universe keeps going." She joined him at the viewport, folding her hands behind her back. Up close, the starlight caught the edges of her ears, outlining them in silver. "I have been considering," she said, "what it would mean to proceed." Vincent's heart thudded. "Proceed how?" "Carefully," she said. "With boundaries, with honesty, and with the understanding that neither of us owes the other certainty." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That sounds manageable." She glanced at him. "You negotiate impossibilities for a living." "Yes," he said, "but this feels harder. There's no clause for embarrassment." "There is," she said. "You simply do not read it aloud." He laughed, the sound echoing softly against the glass. "You know, if anyone had told me this assignment would involve emotional self-discovery, I would have asked for hazard pay." Her ears flicked inward. "Your people compensate emotional labor?" "We try. Poorly." They stood there watching the slow ballet of distant traffic. No promises were made. No declarations followed. But something had shifted, subtle as orbital drift. Vincent glanced at her. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm glad it happened, even if I never live it down." Kyreth met his gaze, her expression unreadable but warm. "So am I." The stars continued their endless motion, bearing witness to treaties yet unsigned and feelings still unnamed, as two figures stood side by side, no longer pretending that the silence between them meant nothing at all. The station entered its artificial night cycle without asking permission, dimming the lights in long corridors and deepening the blues of the viewport glass. Vincent noticed it only because his slate politely reminded him to rest, hydrate, and avoid emotionally destabilizing decisions for at least 6 hours. He dismissed the alert. The slate seemed disappointed. Sleep did not come easily anyway. He lay on the narrow bunk in his quarters, staring at the ceiling as it projected a slow rotation of stars meant to calm human nervous systems. Vincent suspected it was calibrated for better adjusted humans. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind replayed the day with merciless clarity. The silence, the ears, the word that had slipped free and refused to be taken back. He wondered if the translator dreamed, and if so, whether it dreamed of him. A chime sounded at his door. Vincent sat up too fast and immediately regretted it. "Yes?" he said to no one in particular. "May I enter?" Kyreth's voice came through the panel, filtered but unmistakable. He stared at the door, then at the ceiling, then back at the door, as if hoping one of them would intervene. "Yes," he said. "Please, yes, Ambassador. Or Kyreth. Whichever is, appropriate." The door slid open. Kyreth stepped inside, her presence immediately altering the room's balance, as if the air itself had adjusted to accommodate her. She had removed the formal outer layer of her attire. What remained was still elegant but less ceremonial. Lines softened, colors muted. Her ears were relaxed, angled slightly outward. "I apologize for the hour," she said. "My species does not experience fatigue in the same way. I forget this sometimes." Vincent gestured vaguely at the bunk. "I was doing a very convincing impression of rest." She inclined her head. "You appeared restless? You can tell that from the hallway?" "I can tell that from the station's environmental data," she said. "Your heart rate has been inconsistent." He blinked. "The station tattles." "It monitors," she corrected. "Tattling implies judgment." "Pretty sure it judges me," Vincent muttered. She allowed herself a small smile and moved toward the viewport, gazing out at the slow curve of distant nebulae. "Tomorrow," she said, "we finalize the corridor agreement." Vincent nodded. "Yes, the big moment. History books, footnotes, possibly a misprint of my name." "There will be no misprint," she said calmly. "I have ensured that." "Thank you," he said. "Again. For many things." She turned to face him. "I did not come to discuss treaties." "Good," Vincent said. "I've run out of coherent arguments." Kyreth studied him for a moment, then sat in the single chair, folding her hands neatly. "I have been reflecting," she said. On what you asked earlier, about suppressed truths. He leaned back against the bunk, attentive. And, in my culture, she continued, we believe that shared danger accelerates emotional clarity. Vincent raised an eyebrow. We believe that too. Usually right before someone does something heroic or incredibly stupid. Sometimes both, she said. Silence settled between them, but it was softer now, shaped by familiarity rather than shock. Vincent realized he no longer felt like he was standing on the edge of a diplomatic cliff, more like a strange plateau he had not known existed. I need to know, Kyreth said quietly, whether you wish this to continue beyond implication. He swallowed. That depends on what this is. A deliberate exploration, she said, of what has already begun. Vincent laughed softly. You make it sound like a scientific study. In many ways it is, she replied, with unknown variables, cultural incompatibilities, significant external pressure. High risk, Vincent said. No guaranteed outcome. Yes. He considered this, then shrugged slightly. That's most of my job. Her ears angled inward. You are afraid. Absolutely, Vincent said. I'm also curious, which is how humans usually get into trouble. Kyreth rose and stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. I will not ask you for promises, she said, nor will I offer ones I cannot keep. I appreciate that, he said. I'm very bad at pretending certainty. She extended one hand, not touching him, just offering the gesture. Then let us proceed with honesty and humor and the understanding that mistakes will occur. He looked at her hand, then up at her face. I can guarantee the mistakes. Good, she said. It would be suspicious otherwise. He took her hand lightly, the contact brief but electric, like a circuit closing. For a moment neither spoke. The station hummed around them, indifferent and eternal. Vincent exhaled. You know, he said, if this goes terribly wrong, I want it noted that I tried to be responsible. Kyreth's ears flicked inward, unmistakably amused. Noted. And if it goes well? He smiled. Then I'll take credit. She released his hand and stepped back, composure returning, though something warmer lingered beneath it. Rest, she said. Tomorrow will require all of you. Yes, Ambassador, Vincent said, then hesitated. Kyreth? She paused at the door. Yes? Thank you, he said, for coming and for not involving fire. Her smile was small and genuine. There is still time. The door slid shut behind her. Vincent lay back on the bunk, heart steady now, the stars above him turning slowly. For the first time since arriving on the station, sleep found him, not because the universe had grown quieter, but because he had finally stopped pretending he was unaffected by it. The signing chamber was brighter than any room on the station, as if light itself had been recruited to bear witness. Transparent panels curved overhead, revealing the slow drift of stars beyond, their ancient patience lending gravity to the moment. Vincent stood at the central table, slate in hand, posture straighter than it had been days ago. He still looked tired. No miracle had cured that. But the exhaustion no longer hollowed him out. It sat alongside something steadier, quieter, like a compass finally aligned. Across from him, Kyreth reviewed the final document. Her long ears were calm, angled neutrally, no longer betraying tension or surprise. She looked exactly as an ambassador should look at the end of historic negotiations. Composed, focused, ready. And yet, when her gaze lifted briefly to meet Vincent's, there was something unmistakably personal there, a shared understanding that existed entirely outside the record. This clause confirms shared oversight with rotational authority, she said aloud, for the benefit of the room. Vincent nodded. Yes, rotation every standard cycle, dispute resolution through joint counsel, and absolutely no surprise amendments hidden in footnotes. A murmur of approval rippled through the delegations. Someone from the avian species made a satisfied clicking sound. Vincent took that as a win. The final confirmations were given. The slates chimed in sequence, soft and ceremonial. When Kyreth placed her palm against the interface, the system recognized her biometric signature instantly. Vincent followed, his own signature added beside hers, human and alien, bound not by accident this time, but by intent and care. The chamber erupted into polite applause, restrained cheers, and one overly enthusiastic gas emission that echoed longer than necessary. "It's done," Vincent murmured. "Yes," Kyreth said quietly. "It is." The delegations began to disperse, already shifting their focus to celebrations, reports, and the next inevitable complications of peace. Vincent remained where he was for a moment, watching the stars beyond the glass. He felt lighter than he had when the talks began. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was finished, and because something new had been allowed to begin without secrecy or denial. "Negotiator Vincent," Kyreth said, her voice formal again, though only just. He turned, smiling. "Ambassador Kyreth." She held his gaze for a beat longer than protocol required. "I believe the translation anomaly will now be officially archived." He winced playfully. "I was hoping it might mysteriously vanish. I have ensured it is categorized under non-repeatable human linguistic events," she said. "That's comforting." Her ears flicked inward. "It also includes a recommendation that you be well-rested before future negotiations. I will frame that." Later on the observation deck, the station's artificial day cycle had settled into a gentle glow. Ships moved in slow arcs outside, departing toward newly opened routes. Vincent leaned against the railing, hands resting easily, no longer fidgeting. Kyreth joined him moments later, standing close but not touching, the space between them intentional and unstrained. "You will return to your world soon," she said. "Yeah," Vincent replied. "They'll want reports, explanations, and a very long meeting about why my name is trending in diplomatic circles." She tilted her head. "Trending? Human term. Means I'll never hear the end of this." "Nor should you," she said mildly. "You have altered interstellar relations." "Accidentally," he said. "Deliberately," she corrected. "Eventually." He laughed softly. "I suppose that's growth." They stood in silence for a while, watching a cargo vessel jump to faster than light, its departure marked by a brief distortion in space that rippled like water. Vincent felt a familiar ache at the thought of leaving, but it no longer frightened him. Distance, he had learned, did not erase intent. "We will continue to communicate," Kyreth said. "Privately, publicly, carefully." "Carefully," Vincent echoed. "With humor." "And honesty," she added. "Especially that." She turned to face him fully now, her expression open. "I once told you that bonding in my culture is considered after long observation and shared purpose." He nodded. "You did." "That observation continues," she said. "The purpose has not ended." Vincent met her gaze, no longer searching for the right words out of fear, but choosing them with care. "Then I'll make sure the next thing I say is entirely intentional." Her ears angled inward, warm and unmistakable. "I would expect nothing less." When it was time to part, there were no dramatic declarations, no public ceremonies, and certainly no fire. Just a quiet understanding, sealed not by a slip of the tongue, but by deliberate truth. Vincent walked back toward his quarters feeling different. Not braver, not wiser, but more honest with himself than he had ever been. He had come to the station as a negotiator determined to control every word. He was leaving as someone who understood that sometimes the most important truths emerged when control faltered, and that growth meant choosing to face those truths, awake, aware, and unafraid. Behind him, the stars continued their endless motion, bearing silent witness to treaties signed, misunderstandings survived, and a single accidental phrase that had changed far more than the fate of a corridor between worlds.